It all started right after I bought a house with a yard. My husband and my mother-in-law were all smiles as they made an unsolicited declaration of moving in. They're saying they're gonna move in too. If you don't like it, you can just divorce my son. If the mother-in-law is coming, that means sister-in-law of mine will surely follow. They know full well I'd hate this, and yet, here we are. The harassment that's bound to continue even after moving. I couldn't help but shudder. I don't want this. I'm not planning to live with you guys. You seem to not know your place. My mother-in-law raised her eyebrows in disbelief. What she pulled out next was a divorce paper. Already signed by my husband. Her face read clear as day, all she cared about was getting the house. Their plan worked out terrifyingly well. I struggled to suppress my laughter. How I must have looked, trembling and looking down. My mother-in-law appeared victorious. I solemnly signed the divorce papers, packed my bags, and left that dreadful in-laws house behind. The day I moved out, I got a nasty call from my former mother-in-law. You've realized it now, haven't you? The former mother-in-law was insisting we meet to talk. Exactly what I wanted. I'd go and give her a piece of my mind. After meticulous planning to put them in their place, I was on my way to the showdown. My name is Tatiana. I work as an office worker at a marketing agency. It was the department head of a newspaper company who introduced me to Ken. Unable to reject the department head's offer due to my vulnerable position. At 29, I ended up marrying Ken after a 6-month courtship, overwhelmed by his persistence. I would curse myself for a long time for making a wrong decision at such a critical moment. From the start, I believe my mother-in-law intended to deceive me. She seemed calm and kind, but once I became her daughter-in-law, she showed her true colors. She dropped the facade of an understanding older woman to reveal the demon mother-in-law beneath. Hey, Tatiana! What are you dragging your feet for? Didn't I tell you to weed the garden after you're done with the dishes? There wasn't a single day the screeching voice of my mother-in-law didn't fill the in-laws' house. I was daily filled with dread. Barely managing a sigh in response was all I could muster. After marrying, I reluctantly agreed to live with my husband's family at his insistence. His father had passed away from illness, and his mother had been suffering from a limp for years. He begged me, saying he couldn't bear to leave his elderly mother alone in their old home. But once we moved in, what do you know? The supposedly pained mother-in-law was walking around just fine, claiming it was her duty to train me, harshly, every day. And my husband? No better. Even when I expressed a desire to live separately, he would find an excuse to avoid it. Always under his mother's thumb. Never standing up for me when his mother scolded me. I'm sorry, my family's got quite the temper. Don't just stand there smiling, help me. I'm really struggling here. After the marriage, I started feeling intense anxiety and depression. I'd find myself crying unexpectedly or suddenly feeling sick. After seeing a specialist, I was diagnosed with an adjustment disorder. Realizing how negatively living with my in-laws' family was impacting me was truly disheartening. My mother-in-law, uncaring of how I felt, continued to make unreasonable demands. Don't you dare slack off just because it's your day off. Have you finished cleaning the room? You haven't even gone shopping yet? Make sure you check the sales before you go. Please stop rushing me. I have a headache. I'll make sure to clean and do the shopping later. Don't be so lazy. Do as you're told. You're a daughter-in-law, aren't you? I wish I could have told her a daughter-in-law is not a maid. Her demands were mostly about the house itself. Clean out the gutters, replace the paper on the sliding doors, deal with the splinters on the pillars. Our family home is really old and falling apart at the seams. When the wind blows, it creaks and sways. Each time it happens, my mother-in-law hurries my husband, begging him to quickly set up a new home. This place is a rental, you know. We're renting it cheap from an acquaintance. Don't you want to live freely in your own home for once? Don't you think so, Ken? I do, but with what I take home, a dream house is just a dream. My mother-in-law, frustrated with her ineffective son. Of course, her irritation is taken out on me, his wife. Cook, clean, weed the garden, take her to the doctor. I'm exhausted from working full-time, but she couldn't care less. It'd be strange if I didn't end up sick. That's how I felt every single day. Half a year after moving into my in-laws' house, a woman came along to make my tough life even tougher. My sister-in-law, Yasmin, returned home after her divorce, bringing her child with her. She was kicked out after saying, "I never want to see your face again." Well, it was my fault. I neglected my child and slept with my husband's colleague. What on earth is wrong with this woman's morals? Seeing me appalled, Yasmin smirked. Just like her mother, Yasmin's actions mirrored her looks. She refused to do any housework and even had me clean her room. Can't help it, right? I'm raising a child. You wouldn't understand since you've never had one. It's harder than it looks. So, I'm counting on your support. Yasmin doesn't work. She lounges around all day. Taking care of her child is an afterthought at best. She just lies on the sofa, doing nothing. Her behavior on weekends is the worst. She leaves her young daughter with me and goes off to the gambling parlor. Apparently, Yasmin has bad company, as she sometimes gathers with them to drink from noon. She doesn't help with the housework at all, a true freeloader. Yasmin would do anything to get money for her leisure. Here's what happened one day. Yasmin handed me a drawstring bag, and when I asked what it was, "That's from her dad. Jewelry, and such." What? What do you expect me to do with this? You're so slow. Sell them. And make sure you get a good price, okay? My deceased father's belongings. Essentially all that was left of him. And she's asking me to sell them nonchalantly. It made me sad. Thinking of her using the money for gambling made it even worse. I just couldn't do it, so I explained the situation and handed the whole bag over to Ken. What he did with his father's keepsakes, I don't know, nor do I want to. So many things happened around the time Yasmin came back. My things started to disappear frequently. And it was around then I found out Ken might be cheating. My friend who works at a different company happened to see him on a day off, walking arm in arm with a flashy-looking young woman. I was furious when I heard, "I'm working hard even on my days off, and you're out having fun with some young girl? That's cheating, isn't it? Who is she? Tell me the truth." It's not cheating. She's just a girl from a strip club. And how is that okay? Can't you, a married man, stay away from places like that? Yasmin watched our exchange, laughing uproariously. As for my mother-in-law, she seemed disappointed but didn't criticize Ken much. According to her, a husband's visit to such places is a sign of his wife's lack of dedication. Getting all worked up over that, how embarrassing. The fault is yours. If you'd been more attentive to Ken, none of this would have happened. I don't agree at all. Isn't that a bit unreasonable? In this house, that's normal. And you know, visiting strip clubs or cheating is like a man's proof of ability. A wife should forgive such things with a big heart. What a failure of a wife. My common sense seemed to be their nonsense. Forgive visits to strip clubs or cheating? Impossible. My frustration only grew. I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. To change this unpleasant situation, I decided to take some action. Yet, my mother-in-law and Yasmin remained the same as ever. Day in and day out, they treated me like some kind of servant. Lying around on the sofa and floor like seals, the two of them would raise their voices the moment they felt hungry. Hey! Why isn't lunch ready yet? It's already noon. Don't dilly-dally. Seriously, you're so slow it's frustrating. Well, why don't you make it yourselves? I've been cleaning the yard and shopping without a moment's rest, you know? Don't talk back. Do you even understand your place as a daughter-in-law? It seems even having an opinion isn't allowed. Frankly, I was fed up. I wanted a divorce, and fast. But if it were that easy, I wouldn't be in this mess. The person who introduced me to my husband was a manager at a newspaper company we both respected. I had even been asked by my boss not to do anything that would embarrass him. Infuriatingly, my mother-in-law knew this all too well and often used it against me. I was completely trapped. For a while, all I could do was endure. Then one day, my husband's infidelity became an undeniable fact. A colleague from a competitor caught him red-handed. This was the first step in my preparation. I had to make the next move. About a month later, I think. After dinner, my sister-in-law spread out a housing catalog on the table. It was unmistakably the one I had kept in my bag. Look at this. Looks like Tatiana was planning to buy a house. Wait. You went through my bag? Why would you do that? Just be quiet. Oh? It's a bit rural but looks like a nice house. Hey, Tatiana. You should have consulted me about this. The house I had my eye on was a detached house with a yard. Just as my mother-in-law said, it was in the countryside but a pretty nice property. I had already visited the place a few times and met with the real estate agent. When I opened up about it, the three of them finally took the bait. What? You've gone that far in discussions? You're buying it? It's cheap and spacious, not bad at all. Ken, a man needs to have guts. But, a house with a yard, huh? That's a tough decision. If you're going to be the man of the house, Mom's behind you. I might even help out a bit. Weren't you planning to move out and live with just the two of you? Before I even had to do anything, my mother-in-law was egging my husband on. What a hypocritical way to put it. As if they'd let me off that easily. When I asked who would be the owner, my husband frowned. I'm the head of the household, aren't I? It's gonna be in my name, of course. So, we're moving forward with this? Buying this house and moving out together? All right, I get it. I'm a man too. Let's buy that house. Hurry up with the arrangements. My husband finally made up his mind. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law praised his decision. But I didn't miss it. I saw the two of them exchange knowing smiles. A few days later, right after we bought the rural house with a yard, my husband and mother-in-law, all smiles, made an unsolicited declaration of moving in. Mom is moving in too. What? But, we were supposed to move out and live on our own. After thinking it over, we decided to live together after all. You wouldn't say no, right? If you do, you're looking at a divorce. Wonder what your boss would say. There it was. Such a cowardly tactic. If the mother-in-law was coming, there was no way her obnoxious daughter wouldn't follow. Imagining the harassment that would surely continue at the new place, I shivered. Absolutely not. I have no intention of living with you guys, not even a little. What? What are you talking about? You don't seem to understand your place. My mother-in-law's anger was visible. A vein throbbing at her temple. What she pulled out was a divorce form. Already signed by my husband. Her face said it all, as long as she got the house, nothing else mattered. If you really hate it that much, here. Sign this. Fine, I will. I'll sign it. I want a divorce. I've had enough. Hey, Tatiana. Really, you okay with this? Ken, let her be. A snobby and useless woman like her, living together would only make my blood boil. You're young, you'll find another wife soon enough. Such cruel words. I solemnly signed the divorce papers. My mother-in-law was triumphant. She had no idea how I was feeling. The plan worked out scarily well. I was desperately trying to hold back my laughter. A few days after I moved into my new apartment, my phone kept ringing with calls from my ex-mother-in-law. Checking the calendar, it was just as I thought. Today was their moving day. You've realized it by now. The phone kept ringing non-stop. Classic ex-mother-in-law behavior. Despite ignoring it, she kept calling. I answered the call out of sheer annoyance. She started yelling without even a greeting. You! How could you do this to us? What kind of a place did you trick us into buying? Long time no see. Please, calm down. What are you talking about? I don't quite understand. Don't play dumb. This house. You knew it was defective and you bought it anyway, didn't you? That's it, isn't it? She was right. The house I chose had issues. The ground itself was weak, and the land often sank. Even new houses would sometimes have doors that wouldn't close after a few years. Apparently, there were mining tunnels running nearby, which caused the trouble. However, for locals, this was common knowledge. They built their homes on stable land. It was the carefree newcomers who suffered from troubles. This time, I used such a problematic house to trap those three. Colluding with the real estate agent to find a reasonably priced defective house was a struggle. Of course, having my ex-sister-in-law steal the real estate catalog from my bag was part of the plan. I deliberately placed my bag in an easy-to-steal-from spot. Unaware, the three of them fell right into the trap and moved out. Holding back my laughter while signing the divorce papers was difficult. I wanted to spill everything, but I couldn't. I feigned ignorance. A defective house? There's no way. Could it be a misunderstanding? What's with that tone? How dare you? Anyway, come over here right now. No, thank you. Honestly, I never want to see you guys again. What? What did you say? There's no way I'd want to meet that monster family again. Even if they offered me money, I'd refuse. Then my ex-husband came on the line. Hey, Tatiana. Please. Just try to understand us a little. Those words, I'm sending them right back at you. Ken, did you ever consider my feelings? You didn't, right? I've always been isolated, haven't I? I'm sorry. Hey, where are you now? Tell me where you moved to. As if I'd tell you. If you ended up coming over, I'd have to move again. Anyway, I want to cut ties with you guys. The discussion remained at a stalemate. Eventually, my ex-mother-in-law started making even more absurd claims. The divorce was invalid, and they were still family, she claimed. I had gotten signatures from Ken on the divorce papers and consulted with a lawyer to proceed with it. Is divorce invalid? Impossible. How far could their lack of common sense go? Anyway, just come and talk once. We're getting nowhere like this. Please. I'm asking you too, Tatiana. Just once, let's settle this properly. Okay? My ex-mother-in-law and husband insisted on meeting to talk. Even if I refused, they'd likely keep calling. At this point, there was no other choice. I'll meet them and give them a piece of my mind. Fine. I'll meet you once. Thank you. I really appreciate it. But I'll choose the place and time, okay? I didn't want to risk being ambushed or followed. I had to maintain the upper hand to avoid any further scares. After careful preparation, I called the three of them to a certain cafe. I arrived 20 minutes late to the cafe I had specified. My ex-mother-in-law and ex-sister-in-law were already furious. And my ex-husband wore a wry smile. Just as predictable as ever. How dare you make us wait? You're really beyond rude. I don't want to hear about manners from you. What do you want? What do you mean, what do you want? Because of you, we're stuck in a defective house. Take responsibility for your actions. I have no idea what you're talking about. It was your decision to move in together, wasn't it? My ex-mother-in-law was at a loss for words. Seems like she couldn't deny that. She and my ex-sister-in-law had jumped into the defective house situation by themselves. Their previous home had started undergoing major renovations. Meaning, their only option now was that defective house. If you're done, let me say something. I'm going to sue you for emotional distress and seek damages. Be prepared. What? Damages? Sue me? Why would you do that? Tell me exactly what I did to you. You drove me to the point of developing an adjustment disorder. I showed them a copy of the medical diagnosis I had received from the hospital. The three of them stared at it intently. Especially my ex-mother-in-law, whose eyes were wide as saucers. She probably never imagined I had seen a psychiatrist. You never consider how your harsh words affected others. It was really hard for me. I felt nauseous, tears would come, it was really tough. That's because you're too weak. It's your fault for being such a lousy daughter-in-law in the first place, isn't it? Isn't it? That too. You kept calling me a lousy daughter-in-law. You know, that's considered an insult, which can be punished in prison or a fine. What? That's an exaggeration. Exaggeration? My ex-mother-in-law doesn't understand. She doesn't realize how serious her actions were. The extent of her wrongdoing. You also committed criminal acts against me. Remember how you threatened to tell my boss about the divorce? That's blackmail. Come on. Aren't you being a bit dramatic? Not at all. You may end up in prison or a fine as well. I won't back down, you know? Wait. My ex-sister-in-law chimed in, her gaze sharper than usual. Maybe you'd call it a defiant look. Typical of a former delinquent. As if she wouldn't be intimidated by such threats. All I've heard so far is you taking advantage of our mom's ignorance to scare her. Do you have any proof of us insulting or blackmailing you? I do. Because I've been recording everything. Recording? Yes, I had been using the voice memo feature on my phone all along. I had recordings from my entire time at the ex-in-laws. There's quite a lot of audio. I prepared data extracting just the parts where I was verbally abused. Submitting this as evidence would almost certainly secure a conviction for both the insult and blackmail charges. Did you really think I would just take it? Not just you, mother-in-law, but you too, Yasmin. You'll likely be held accountable as well. What? Why me? What have I done to you? Think about it. Haven't you committed any crimes? Or are you going to say you never caused me any trouble? There's no way. Don't be ridiculous. My ex-sister-in-law insisted she was innocent. I showed her the screen of my smartphone. Her face turned pale instantly. No wonder. What was displayed was a scene of her rummaging through my bag. Looking around suspiciously as she searched through the contents. How disgraceful. What's that? How did you do? When did you even take that? Ever since you arrived, my things started disappearing frequently. My stuff, jewelry, clothes, bags. I set up a hidden camera. That's terrible. What are you doing, going so far? Appalling. Who's the one being inappropriate here? Shall I also tell you about the penalties for theft? I'll be contacting the police later. My ex-sister-in-law was speechless. Wanting to say something but unable to. She looked utterly helpless. I had a record of what had disappeared from my possessions. With an accurate grasp of the damage, the police and lawyers would be able to move more easily. When I decide to do something, I go all the way. I had decided I would never forgive these three. The last one to face was my ex-husband, who shrugged. Of all of them, he was the one I could forgive the least. I thought marriage was about helping each other. But Ken, it seems you had a different idea. From beginning to end, you were always against me. Enemy? I never intended that. Not even a little bit. Believe me. Even today, I was trying to mediate as best as I could. Sure. I've had enough of lies. I don't need any mediation. My ex-husband was a cowardly opportunist. Always siding with the stronger party. Just as he had always sided with my ex-mother-in-law and ex-sister-in-law. And even now. Trying to appease me in any way, hoping to be the only one forgiven. If he had been a bit more of a decent man, maybe I would have continued our marriage. If he had said we should live alone in a different place, I might have gone along. Your affair partner's name is Mariana, right? What? Why? How do I know? I had it investigated. I have a friend who's good at this kind of thing. I even have a photo of you and her entering a hotel together. Here, look. No! Don't show me! Please, don't! As I attempted to show him the phone screen, my ex-husband frantically tried to block it. He didn't want his mother and sister to see the evidence of his infidelity. As if it mattered. Morals and ethics had long been broken in this family of similar individuals. I put my smartphone and the copy of the diagnosis back into my bag. There was no more evidence that I needed to present to them. My ex-mother-in-law, ex-husband, and ex-sister-in-law seemed to have lost their will to fight. Afraid that if they did anything rash, they would be reported. Too bad, I was fully prepared to consult the police regardless of their actions. You can expect the police to visit you eventually. It's better not to run. Your crime might become more severe. And make sure you don't follow me. Understand? Tatiana! Don't be so cold. We were husband and wife until recently, right? Yes. Frankly, marrying you was a huge mistake. I feel relieved now that we're no longer married. If you follow me, I'll sue you for that as well. Don't wait outside my workplace. Don't contact me unless it's something really important. I made a few simple agreements with the three of them and left the cafe. After I exited, the three of them remained downcast. You can't lock a person's mouth. The story of our divorce and the reason being his infidelity and mistreatment of me spread quickly through his company. As a result, my ex-husband ended up being quite ostracized within the company. After all, the mediator had been a manager from a newspaper company we had dealings with. It was only natural that my ex-husband, having lost trust, would be viewed harshly. Unable to bear the discomfort, he eventually resigned. His attempts at finding a new job didn't go well, and his relationship with his mother and sister started to deteriorate. He appeared before me again about a year after our divorce. I was stopped by him on my way back from work, and there stood a disheveled man. Ken, I didn't recognize you at first. Yeah. People say I've changed a lot lately. He seemed to be struggling, which was to be expected. Both his mother and sister were convicted and fined. And I had sued him for damages. They must be financially strained now. Especially with the loan for the defective house they live in. How are your mom and Yasmin doing? They're alive. Barely getting by. Both are working now. They have to make ends meet. They always say they want to go back to how things were. Want to go back to living off my and your earnings. Just like always. Parasites, I thought. Cutting ties was definitely the right decision. I expected him to retort, but he didn't. Instead, my ex-husband sighed deeply and said, I've really messed up. I'm sincerely sorry. I was an idiot. You were right. I should have always been on your side. I must have been out of my mind. I think your family was out of their minds from the start. Don't be so cold. Please, I'm begging you. Let's live together again. I'll cut ties with that family for good. I mean it. You're all I have. Oh, really? Too bad. I already have someone else. And even if I didn't, I'd never want to start over with you. As I firmly said this, my ex-husband collapsed to his knees. But any performance to elicit sympathy from me now was futile. Had I been a little less refined, I might have spat on him right there. I left him behind and went on my way home. I never heard from him again after that. The person who informed me about this was the real estate agent who had helped me. The lives of my ex-mother-in-law, ex-husband, and ex-sister-in-law apparently got significantly worse. They constantly blamed each other for their impoverished lifestyle, worsening their relationship. From their house, one could hear arguments and the sound of breaking glass almost every night. They insulted and tormented each other, yet couldn't seem to leave each other. It was nothing short of hell. They became quite isolated in their community, with nobody eager to associate with them. Eventually, they'd probably have to sell the house they can't sell for much and end up homeless with debt. I can clearly imagine the three of them, huddling together under the cold sky, cursing each other. Someday, I'd like to see the miserable state of those who have fallen to rock bottom with my own eyes. Meanwhile, I'm living a blissfully happy life. Thanks to my new partner I once mentioned to my ex-husband. He's a successful salesperson at a major trading company. A mature man who respects others' values, calm and gentle. Plus, he's also divorced like me. Soon, we plan to have a modest wedding. My first marriage was a tremendous ordeal. Even now, I occasionally remember the hardship and almost burst into tears. But whenever I lean on my partner, my heart warms immediately. This is where I belong. It was a long journey, but I finally found my place. Having experienced hardship, I believe I can be kinder to others. I want to live my life positively, using my experiences as a foundation. That's how I feel these days. Oh no, I forgot to buy it, Madison said and then started laughing as if she found it amusing. Jacob joined in with the laughter. Their reactions were like something out of a comedian. But this was no sketch. Madison probably deliberately didn't prepare my plane ticket. It's clear from her usual behavior. She seems to find me, her mother-in-law, a bother. So, she probably didn't want to take me on the family trip. On the morning of the trip. In the middle of the travel season, it was going to be tough to secure a plane ticket now. So, that's her excuse for leaving me behind. Well, it can't be helped. If that's what Madison wants, I'll back down. But this petty meanness of hers might have repercussions down the line. They might regret it, but it's her doing. She'll have to take responsibility as an adult. My name is Grace Brown. I'm 52 years old. I lost my husband 2 years ago and now live with my son and his wife. Jacob, my son, is hardworking and got a job at a major company after graduating from a prestigious university. Then he met Madison, got married, and they had a son, Tom. It's a picture-perfect life. However, I'm not part of my son's life plan. My daughter-in-law, Madison, blatantly treats me as a nuisance, and Jacob just goes along with whatever she says. You should work too. As soon as she enters the room, Madison says this with her arms crossed. Can't you at least earn your own living expenses and help support the family? But, with Jacob's income, I don't really need to work. Jacob is still young, at 29, but he's already seen as a promising employee. His income is stable. However, Madison completely dismisses my argument. Don't you think it's shameful to rely entirely on your son's income for food, clothing, and the house you live in? Is that really necessary to say? It's the truth, she says with a cold voice. We can barely afford just Tom's extracurricular activities. It sounds like she's making a reasonable argument. But I know the truth. Madison splurges on designer bags and cosmetics, straining our finances. All right, I understand. Realizing that arguing was futile, I contacted an old acquaintance that day to ask for a job. I wanted to return to work as a part-timer at the company where I worked when I was young. As soon as I went back to work, Madison's whims only increased. She started to hang out with friends using the time when Jacob and I were not around. Jacob, can I talk to you for a second? What's up, Mom? I had brought up my concerns to Jacob just once before. Madison had gradually been coming home later and was starting to forget about household chores. Laundry would be left hanging even in the evening, and dinner wouldn't be ready. There were aspects I just couldn't cover anymore. Could you talk to Madison? At least ask her to properly do the household chores. It's probably pointless if I say it. All right. Jacob nodded then, but it seemed like he never actually spoke to her. Or maybe Madison talked her way out of it. Either way, Madison's behavior didn't improve. The one who felt sorry was Tom. I'm hungry. Just wait a bit, I'll make something you can eat. When Tom came back from school, he was in a situation where he couldn't even have dinner, let alone a snack. I was out working until the last minute, too. Even if I started cooking dinner as soon as I got home, dinner time inevitably got pushed back. Grandma, I want to eat pasta. All right. Let's have pasta tonight then. Yeah. Despite it all, Tom never blamed anyone. He didn't complain about the late dinners, and he honestly ate whatever I cooked. Grandma's food is delicious. I'm glad. I petted Tom's head as he happily munched on pasta, feeling relieved. Tom looks like his father, reminding me of Jacob when he was young. Jacob used to love the pasta I made, too. While thinking about this, I wait for the two of them to come home. I'm home. I heard a voice from the entrance. Madison walked into the living room. In her hands, she carried shopping bags with brand logos on them. Welcome back, Madison. Jacob, who had come home from work earlier, casually greeted her. It seemed Jacob was rather proud of his wife's extravagant spending. He felt fulfilled as a man for being able to provide his wife with a life of luxury. Feeling this from his profile, I sighed. I wonder what Madison and Jacob think about Tom. Both of you. After dinner, as Tom went back to his room, I seized the moment to speak up. What is it? Tom feels lonely every day when he comes back from school. You, as his parents, should properly welcome him home. About that, you see. Mesmerized by her new bag, Madison spoke. Her tone was casual, as if it were an afterthought. His teacher said with Tom's current grades, he won't get into a good middle school. So, we were thinking of increasing his private tutoring hours. If you push him too hard, Tom is going to collapse. I exclaimed almost like a scream. Tell Jacob too. Do not push the boy too hard. I leave Tom's education up to Madison. Jacob's gaze was fixed on the TV program as he answered. If Madison says so, then I think that's fine too. Jacob! What was he thinking? Jacob had always lacked a sense of independence. During his school days, that was treated as a virtue. He was the kid who listened well to teachers and parents. Now, it seems like he's just following Madison. Jacob, you're his parent too. Quit nagging. The parents have agreed it's okay. Can't you just be quiet, Mom? Exactly. Jacob and Madison together dismissed my words. But just as I was about to say more, I heard footsteps. Tom had come back. Tom. It's okay, Grandma. I'll work hard on my studies. You're such a good boy, Tom. Madison smiled at Tom. He bravely nodded back at his mother. True to his word, Tom started private tutoring sessions. It was an obviously unsustainable schedule. Soon, Tom fell ill. Tom looked feeling bad in the morning. His face clearly showed he had a fever. Tom, you should stay home from school today. Don't make decisions on your own. Madison snapped back, irritated, but I stood my ground. He has a fever. He needs to rest. So, don't tell me what to do about my son. Her hysterical voice cut off. Jacob came in with a cheerful voice, saying, I got some time off. Starting today, I'm on vacation. This weekend, we're going on a family trip. Really? Madison's mood instantly changed to a smile. Her stance shifted dramatically. Then we need to get that fever down. I'll have him skip school, so please take Tom to the doctor. What? Just moments ago, she insisted he go to school. Now, she's saying to skip school and go to the doctor instead. Confused but prepared, I got ready to take Tom to the hospital. Regardless of the reason, it's good that Tom can skip school. And I can take him to the hospital. Sorry, Grandma. It's all right. Let's go to the hospital together. Yeah. After nodding, Tom muttered to himself. I hate bitter medicine. Then we'll ask the doctor for medicine that isn't bitter. Really? Tom finally showed a childlike expression. His eyes were sparkling. Is there such a thing as sweet medicine? There must be. Let's ask the doctor about it, okay? Yeah. Holding the innocently smiling Tom's hand, I got into the car driven by Jacob. When we arrived at the hospital parking lot, Jacob said, "I don't want to catch a cold either, so I won't go inside the hospital." "That's so heartless," I protested, but Jacob didn't pay any attention. He didn't get out of the car finally, so I reluctantly led Tom to the reception. The hospital was fairly busy. Everyone looked somewhat unwell, and it was painful. Then, it happened. "Help! Are you okay?" An elderly person sitting next to us suddenly clutched their head in pain. Though I was panicked, I managed to call a nurse. "Over here! Someone has collapsed and looks in pain." "This is serious." The nurse who responded also looked pale. It was a dangerous situation. "Is he going to be okay?" "He'll be fine. The doctor will take care of him." Holding the anxious Tom's hand, I reassured him. Inwardly, I wasn't sure what would happen. I wondered if the elderly person would be saved. The other patients were also looking in the direction the elderly person was taken, murmuring amongst themselves. After a while, a man in a white coat approached. In my flustered state, it took me a moment to realize he was a doctor. "Good job, Mrs. Brown." "What?" Looking puzzled, the doctor explained the situation to me. "That patient might not have survived if the treatment had been delayed. Thanks to you calling the nurse, the patient was saved." "Oh, it was nothing." I thought it wasn't something to be thanked for. Helping someone in trouble should be natural. Yet, the doctor and the patients looked at me as if I was some kind of hero. "Please, stop it." Feeling embarrassed, I looked down. Peeking at my face, Tom said happily, "Grandma, you're amazing." "Do you think so?" "Yes, you were splendid." The doctor's words, as if to emphasize, were followed by applause from the patients. I felt even more out of place. But, I was glad the elderly person was saved. Returning to the car after Tom's examination, Jacob looked puzzled. "Was there some celebration at the hospital? It was noisy just now." "Grandma helped an elderly man who was in trouble." Tom leaned forward excitedly as he spoke. Jacob's eyes widened in disbelief. "Mom? It's not that big of a deal. Let's go home quickly." "Yeah." The car started moving. On the way home, Tom praised me a lot. Jacob seemed half skeptical, half believing, but that was exactly the reaction I preferred. By the time we got home, Tom had fallen asleep from exhaustion. I picked him up and carried him to his room. As I tucked him into bed, Tom smiled softly. "Grandma, you're amazing." "Oh, Tom. I really hadn't done anything special. If I hadn't gone to call the nurse, surely someone else would have. Then, someone else would have been the hero of the hospital. Is he just sick?" As I walked out of the room, Madison was standing in the hallway. To Madison's question, I replied, "Yes. The doctor said he's probably just worn out. Studying is important, but he's still a child with limited stamina. We can't overdo it." "I see." Her response was as if it were someone else's concern. "Then, we'll let him skip school this week. We have a family trip planned, after all. Tom needs to get better." "That's true." Whatever the reason, I was glad Tom could skip school. It was that night. "Excuse me. Is this the residence of Grace Brown, correct?" "Yes, it is." I had thought it was a delivery or something, but a stranger was standing there. Wondering what it was about, I was on guard. The man started to tell me something unexpected. After the man left, I returned to the living room. "Who was that just now?" Jacob, who was playing video games, asked. I smiled wryly. "Just someone. By the way, where are we going for our trip?" "We haven't decided yet." Relieved at the expected answer, I suggested. "Let's go to France." "Mom, what are you suddenly saying?" "I got some invitations to a hotel in France from an acquaintance. Let's all go together," I said with pride. Jacob and Madison looked at each other. Seeing the skeptical looks on their faces, I showed them the actual invitation. "Here it is." "Wow! That hotel was featured on TV before, Madison said, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Frowning, Jacob stared at me intently. Mom, who gave you this? What does it matter? It's a gift. Madison, beaming, looked at me with anticipation, rubbing her hands together. Thank you. I'm glad you're pleased. Laughing in response, I was foolish. The morning we were finally set to depart on our trip. Oh no, I forgot to buy something. With an unpleasant smile, Madison said. I forgot your plane ticket. It's too late to arrange it now, so you'll have to stay home. That's terrible. Even Jacob was laughing, reacting as if watching a skit on TV. But this was no skit. This was actually happening to me. Okay. I could tell from Madison's expression. She had deliberately not prepared my ticket. Then, Tom timidly said, Then, I won't go either. Oh? Are you still feeling unwell? It's not that, Mom. It's just sad for Grandma to be left alone. Those were kind words. I hugged Tom and said, It's okay. Don't worry about me, just go and have fun. No! It was rare for the honest Tom to insist on his point. Crossing her arms, Madison said, Well, can't be helped. Then, it'll just be Jacob and me going. Just the two of you. Nice. And with that, Madison and Jacob headed to the airport from our home. Left at home, I thought while preparing lunch for Tom and me. Madison. I knew she disliked me. But I never imagined she'd do something this cruel. Well, it can't be helped. I was predicting what would happen next. Because of that invitation. It cannot be used if she is absent. What? Apparently, there was such an exchange between Madison and the hotel manager upon their arrival. Jacob called me in a distressed state, and I listened to his story. The elderly man you helped, Mom, seems to be the CEO of the company that owns the hotel. Yes, that seems to be the case. I nodded over the phone. I had received an explanation about the situation from the man who visited me. Strictly speaking, that elderly man was the former CEO. He had handed over all company responsibilities to his son and was enjoying a peaceful retirement in the countryside. That's when he happened to fall ill and met me at the hospital. That invitation was a token of gratitude from the CEO. So, I thought it probably wouldn't work without me being there. How mean! Jacob said, exasperated, but I had my reasons. Jacob. If you had stood up for me at that moment, I was planning to tell the truth. It's my fault? Jacob's voice grew loud in surprise. Truly, he was unaware of his own lack of compassion. It's sad, considering he's my son. Grace! Madison's furious voice interrupted. Despite the shrillness that hurt my ears. What are you going to do now? We can't stay at the hotel, and all our plans are ruined. If you had taken me on the trip, this trouble wouldn't have happened, would it? It's because of their petty meanness that they ended up being locked out of the hotel together. Other hotels have been contacted, and none will take us in. Then, you have no choice but to come back home. You're joking. Madison raised a distressed voice as if she were the victim. Spending so much money to come to France, we cannot just go back home. I wouldn't recommend sleeping outside. It's dangerous. If you think so, please help us. Madison was wailing like a child. Do something. My first trip to France turned into such a bad memory. I can't help. Seemingly having given up on relying on him. With footsteps, Madison's voice faded away. Is there anyone who can help us? Stop it, it's embarrassing. Mom, I'm gonna hang up for now. Yes. I was rather relieved he decided to hang up. There's nothing I can do from Los Angeles, and I have no reason to be kind to Madison now. With a sigh, I ended the call. After a while, Jacob called again. I hesitated to answer, wondering if I should. But, they are my son and daughter-in-law, after all. I decided to listen and answered the phone. What happened? Someone stole my wallet. What? I never imagined such a thing would actually happen. I was genuinely shocked. Jacob said in a depressed voice. I could sense Madison crying nearby. In just a moment of not paying attention to my bag, everything was taken. Except my phone, which I had in my hand, my wallet, everything. Come pick us up, please. I could hear the tearful voice. That's impossible. I replied. Why not? Securing a plane ticket now is difficult. That's what you said. Oh no! Madison groaned on the phone. But if we wait a few days, we might be able to get a plane ticket, right? Wait a minute. Madison raised her voice angrily at Jacob's suggestion. We don't have any money. If we stay like this, we'll end up waiting for you, without eating or drinking. Don't talk about waiting for days like it's nothing. There's nothing I can do about it. I could feel the tension rising between them. Is there any other way? Don't be so arrogant. Madison was initially angry with Jacob, but her voice gradually weakened, returning to a tearful tone. Please help us. We're overseas and can't communicate well, and we don't know what to do anymore. You're adults, I said, exasperated. Figure it out and act on your own. How can you say that? Please, I apologize for being mean. Just help us, please. Even if you say that. Thinking calmly, the best course of action would be to rely on the local police. However, it seemed Madison, in her panic, couldn't come up with that idea. Finally, Madison broke down crying, and an irritated Jacob said, So, it's okay for us to just end up whatever, Mom? You went on this trip just the two of you, thinking you could handle it, right? What do you want me to do? Eventually, Jacob lost his composure as well. He said angrily, How am I supposed to take responsibility? There's nothing I can do now. As long as you direct your frustration at me, I have nothing to say or teach you. I was about to end the call, when Madison's voice burst through the phone again. What should we do? I'll apologize as much as you want when we get back, so please tell us. Cool your heads first. That's right. If they could calm down, they would be able to think about what to do on their own. I chose to end the call and turned my gaze to the table. On the table, at Tom's request, was a pot of soup that had cooled a bit. I reheated it before calling Tom. Tom, who had been doing his homework in his room, seemed happy. I love Grandma's soup. Thank you. I smiled at his untroubled smile. If Madison hadn't done something unnecessary and the whole family had arrived in France together, Tom could have been enjoying even more delicious food. It's unfortunate because of his mother. Eventually, Madison and Jacob had to rely on the local police. They managed to get seats on a plane back home under the condition that they would pay for the tickets upon their return. Madison looked utterly exhausted at first sight. Her makeup was ruined from crying, making a mess of her appearance. As soon as she saw me, Madison apologized to me. She spoke as if groaning. I'm so sorry. Mom, I'm sorry too. He also offered an apology. This one here has decided not to be mean to you anymore, Mom. Is that true? Yes. From now on, I'll do as you say. Madison looked like she was about to cry again, perhaps deeply hurt by the whole ordeal. Then, I stroked Tom's head as he looked sadly at his parents. From now on, I'll be the one to decide Tom's tutoring and extracurricular activities schedule. What? Madison was shocked, but I stood firm. If I leave it to you, who knows what will happen to Tom? But Tom is my son. Then act like a mother. I snapped firmly. Madison shivered, looking frightened. Seeing that, I continued. From now on, buying luxury bags and hanging out with friends late into the night are banned. You will learn to be a regular housewife and manage household chores. I crossed my arms after saying so. Honestly, these were words I didn't want to say. If you can't do that, you'll have to leave this house. No way!
Hey, Mom, isn't that a bit too much?
Both of them reacted as expected. But this was necessary for Tom's sake. I spent time at home with Tom while the two of them were away. That's when I came to understand.
Jacob, you can't take care of Tom, can you? Well, it's true, but if so, the mother needs to be responsible. If Madison can't do that, we need to find someone else who can take care of Tom. I'll be responsible,
Madison said while blowing her nose with a tissue. It looked like a scolded elementary school student.
I'll take responsibility. So please, don't talk about divorce. Please.
All right. I thought to myself. If she's begging and crying like this, it must have been a good lesson for her. I was too optimistic. I'm home.
Madison.
Less than a month later, Madison started breaking curfew and going out again.
Weren't you supposed to have reflected on your actions?
I did. That's why I'm coming home earlier than before, and I've cut down on shopping, she said nonchalantly, laughing. This was hopeless. I decided to have Jacob prepare the divorce papers. I don't want that. As expected, Jacob protested. But I had anticipated that much. Even after seeing this?
What? What is this?
Looking at the photos spread on the table, Jacob's face twisted. They were photos of Madison cheating. Call it a woman's intuition or whatever. I had a hunch. So, I secretly hired a detective. These photos came with the report.
Even with this, you don't want to divorce Madison? Well, that's...
Jacob hesitated. After all, Madison was cavorting with multiple men. From their attire, they might even be nightclubs or something similar.
She was doing this when I wasn't looking?
Jacob muttered, his shoulders trembling. So, what will you do?
Divorce Madison?
When I asked, Jacob slowly turned to me. Anger was evident in his eyes.
I'll divorce her, Mom.
I see.
So, the household will dissolve then.
Dissolve? Jacob looked puzzled, tilting his head. I nodded and said, I'm leaving this house too.
What?
Jacob exclaimed, taken aback. But I had been considering this for a long time. I wonder if you two can't become independent because I'm here. So, I thought we might try living separately from now on.
But, Mom, that's troublesome.
Jacob hastily clung to me. Despite being much taller than me, he looked smaller because he was kneeling on the floor.
I can't do household chores, and what about Tom?
I'll take Tom with me.
What?
Again, Jacob was surprised. Truly, he had no interest in my actions or thoughts. I had been looking for an apartment to move into for a while now. But Jacob had been completely unaware.
Aren't you my mother? Can a mother abandon her son?
Before that, aren't you Tom's father? Have you ever acted fatherly?
Well, that's...
If he demands motherly behavior from me, Jacob should start acting like a father to Tom.
Both you and Madison are failures as parents. Mom, wait. Give me another chance. I'll get it together, remarry a decent woman, and we can be a family again.
Jacob always proposes what's convenient for him.
Anyway, I'll divorce Madison. We'll talk after that.
No, I've already decided.
Mom.
In response to his pleading voice, I turned away. The moving arrangements are already made. Choosing a place relatively close wasn't for Jacob and Madison's sake. It was solely to ensure Tom wouldn't have to change schools. That day, when Madison returned home late as usual, Jacob confronted her with the divorce papers, turning her face pale.
You're joking, right? You're the one joking around, dating with who knows how many men.
Jacob was furious, but from my perspective, both were making childish arguments. I couldn't bear the burden of the two of them anymore. So, I decided to say goodbye to both of them.
You can't just spring a divorce on me. I have no savings. How am I supposed to live? I can't even do household chores. What am I going to do from now on?
While listening to their desperate voices, I left them. Later, Jacob lost his job for being untidy, far from considering remarriage.
How do you use a washing machine? I don't even know how to iron.
That's probably why he couldn't even wash his clothes. A suit full of wrinkles and stains indeed looks bad. It negatively affected the company's image. Meanwhile, it turned out Madison had been borrowing money from friends to fund her outings. They counted on Jacob's income, which quickly led her into a financial deadlock.
Just wait a little longer. I'll find a way to pay you back.
Madison's figure, begging around, reached me through the grapevine, but I felt nothing anymore. Only Tom said, disappointedly, "They've troubled people other than Grandma too. I'm really let down."
They'll get their act together eventually.
Really? Tom seemed uncertain. After that, Tom began to dedicate himself to his studies voluntarily.
I want to be a hero like Grandma. I'm not such a hero you imagine.
I blushed and looked down. I wished he would forget about that incident. Interestingly, the CEO, upon learning of the situation, sent another invitation to the hotel. But Tom didn't want to go.
I don't want to go. Why? You can eat lots of delicious food on a trip.
Grandma's cooking is the best in the world, Tom said with earnest eyes. I was moved to tears.
Tom,
I'm going to study hard and become a decent adult. That's how I want to make Grandma happy. It was a mature resolve for an elementary school student. Yet, I thought,
taking detours is also necessary to become a decent person.
Is that so?
Yes. If you only study, your heart won't grow. If you play too much, you'll end up like your mother, but studying alone isn't good either.
When I explained this, Tom pursed his lips.
It's difficult. Let's learn little by little.
After all, his journey was just beginning.
Hannah! Mark! What happened?
When I got back from work, an astonishing scene unfolded before me. My daughter Hannah and my husband Mark were lying on the living room floor. Rushing over, I realized neither of them was breathing. Nearby, a rope and what appeared to be a suicide note were carelessly placed. With trembling hands, I picked up the note. The content I read made my head go blank. What in the world? Mark, taking Hannah's life. Then, unable to believe reality, I went through the motions of arranging their funerals. The police had quickly closed the case, assuming the note explained it all. Essentially, they concluded it was a murder-suicide. But that made no sense. Mark would never do such a thing. As I stood there in shock, a person came to visit. And then, an unexpected truth came to light. I immediately told the police, persistently asking them to reinvestigate. Eventually, the police, reluctantly, reopened the case. They came to my house later on.
We're sorry. It wasn't a murder-suicide.
One of the officers said hesitantly.
The two were.
The facts that were revealed next filled me with disbelief. My name is Amy Smith. I'm turning 50 this year. I'm a working mom, holding a part-time job at a small local company. My husband Mark is 52, 2 years my senior. He works in the HR department of a small to medium-sized company, where he's a manager. We have one child, our 11-year-old daughter Hannah, in 5th grade. But Hannah isn't our biological child. She's adopted. Mark and I got married in our 20s, but we couldn't have children. We went through fertility treatments for a long time. But it was too much for my body, and we gave up before I turned 40. Instead, we decided to adopt. And that's how we got Hannah. Hannah grew up healthy, kind, and honest. Whether she's our biological child doesn't matter. We cherish her more than anything. Our family is no different from any other. In fact, our bond is even stronger. That such a horrifying incident could happen to us. I didn't want to believe it. No, I still can't believe it. But it did happen. Mom, I'm home. Hannah would always come home in the evening, greeting me with her bright voice. Behind her, Hannah has been getting along with her classmates who are now close friends.
Hello there. Hi. Welcome.
It's Jake and Mia. Jake is a mischievous boy who's good at video games, and Mia is a diligent honor girl. Somehow they hit it off, and lately, the three of us have been hanging out more. They've gone straight into Hannah's room to enjoy some games together. You can hear their cheerful voices, and it's heartwarming. I'm in the kitchen, preparing snacks for the three of them. It's a pound cake from a bakery downtown, quite affordable. I wondered for a moment if it was too cheap, but then I thought better of it. No need to put on airs. Turns out, the school Hannah goes to has a lot of wealthy families. Due to several top-notch local businesses in the area, it naturally became a gathering place for company CEOs and the like. We got a piece of land from a relative of Mike's at a bargain and just happened to build our house there. We're not particularly wealthy. So, this was unexpected. At school events like parent-teacher meetings, many parents show up in flashy clothes, sporting high-end brands. I felt a bit out of place, a bit uncomfortable with the atmosphere. Me, with no brands to speak of, felt out of place, and conversations at parent meetings about overseas trips and fancy restaurants were all the rage. I clearly remember feeling somewhat uneasy. Therefore, it's inevitable that their kids also wear nice clothes and have developed tastes. Thinking about it, I felt hesitant to serve Hannah's friends snacks that were obviously cheap. But, there's really no need to serve fancy treats to kids. It's not good for Hannah to get used to luxuries from such a young age. I decided to cheer up, knocked on Karen's room, and went inside.
Today's snack is pound cake. Enjoy, everyone.
Cheers from the kids.
Lucky. Thanks, ma'am. Thank you.
Jake's eyes sparkle with excitement, and Mia thanks me sweetly. Mom, thank you, Hannah smiled. Regardless of adults' conveniences, children are innocent. I thought so, but then Jake said something unexpected.
Hey Auntie, this is the cheapest pound cake from the store in front of the station, right? It costs like $2? Wow, you know your stuff, Jake. But even though it's cheap, it's really tasty.
I felt a flutter of panic inside as the child saw right through me.
If it's that store, the $5 cheesecake is the best. Expensive stuff tastes better, right? Is your family, Hannah's family, having financial troubles?
Faced with Jake's blunt questioning, Hannah and I were at a loss for words. I wonder if he talks like this at home too. As I pondered how to respond, Mia came to our rescue.
That's not nice, Jake. It's rude to talk about prices like that. Whatever. By the way, the other day we ordered a cake made by this famous pastry chef, and it was so good.
Jake started boasting carelessly. I was taken aback by his attitude, but Hannah and Mia seemed impressed, nodding along with his story. Well, it's probably just that age when they want to brag about stuff. As the kids got more excited, I decided to leave Hannah's room. That night, Mark came home. As we all gathered around the dinner table, Hannah was chatting away as usual.
We played games today. I beat Mia but couldn't beat Jake. He's good at games. And he knows a lot about stuff, a real foodie too.
Is that so? I nodded along nonchalantly. Remembering the day's events made me feel a bit conflicted, but Hannah didn't seem bothered, so I guessed it was okay. Still, I hadn't expected Jake to suddenly start talking about prices. I remembered that Jake's family is quite well off. I recall seeing Jake's mother at a school event, dressed in expensive clothes, looking down on me. They must be used to only the best, not giving a second thought to cheap pound cakes. Cheap pound cakes are probably beneath their notice. Unaware of all this, Mark just smiled happily.
It's great you have good friends. Yeah, ever since I joined this class, every day's been so much fun.
Just a normal, peaceful time. I was being naive. I never imagined that such ordinary days would suddenly crumble away. The sense of discomfort came quickly. Lately, Hannah seemed a bit off. I wondered if something happened at school. Maybe a fight with friends or trouble with studies. She's been eating less dinner lately and spending more time in her room. This day too, she went straight to her room as soon as she got back. Usually, she'd come into the kitchen saying, "I'm so hungry," and talk brightly about her day at school. Worried, I bought Hannah's favorite muffins on my way home from work. I thought we could eat them together and I could listen to her troubles. "Hannah, snacks are ready." Imagining Hannah's happy face, I opened the door without knocking.
"Wait, don't come in."
Hannah cried out in panic, and something fell from her hand. Sorry. What's this?" I picked it up. Then, Hannah turned pale as a ghost. It was a pregnancy test. The positive line was clearly visible.
"What's this? What is it?"
I couldn't believe what I saw and my voice trembled. "It's..." Hannah stopped speaking and remained silent. No matter how much I pressed, got angry, or whatever I did, Hannah wouldn't speak. She only nodded when I asked if the test was hers. So, Hannah was pregnant. I couldn't believe it. Sure, Hannah had started her periods this year. But she's still a child. I've heard that some precocious kids already have boyfriends, but Hannah wasn't like that. She wouldn't say who the other person was. Could it have been forced on her? The thought made my skin crawl. What kind of person would do such a thing to a child? I persisted until the last minute, hoping Hannah would talk, but it was no use. Finally, Hannah broke down crying. At that point, there was nothing more I could do. I proceeded to prepare the dinner I had abandoned and took care of Mark when he came home. The dinner table, usually lively, was quieter than it had ever been. Hannah hardly ate and quickly said, "I'm going to bed," before retreating to her room again.
"Hannah, wait. We're not done talking."
Calling her back was futile. She wouldn't say a word. Eventually, Mark sensed something was wrong and asked, "What happened? Both of you were so quiet at dinner. Did you have a fight?" At Mark's words, I let out a deep sigh. The truth is, I decided to confide in Mark. This was too big for me to handle alone. Mark was shocked when he heard.
"No way. Are you sure it's not a mistake?"
But I saw it with my own eyes. And Hannah herself said, "It's mine." Mark grimaced and exclaimed,
"But Hannah is still a grade schooler. Who could she have?"
I mentioned something that crossed my mind. "Remember, there was an email about a creep hanging around near the school, warning us to be careful. I don't want to think about it, but maybe. It's possible. Maybe she was approached by a creep on her way home." Mark nodded. "Right. That's why she can't talk about it. But if she really is pregnant, this is serious. We need to take her to an OBGYN. Yeah. And I'll try to talk to Hannah too. Depending on how things go, we might have to go to the police." The word police made me dizzy. This has turned into an unbelievable situation. But we need to catch the perpetrator quickly. I can't forgive someone who would do this to a grade schooler. We must act immediately. Fortunately, tomorrow is Saturday, and everyone is off. I'll persuade Hannah to go to the hospital and the police. We were determined to do this. The next day. After breakfast, I was about to talk to Hannah when my phone rang. "Hello? What?" It was my boss calling. Apparently, there was a problem, and he asked if I could come into work. There are only 5 of us at work, the boss and his wife, 1 full-time supervisor, and 2 part-timers, including me. Normally, part-timers don't work on weekends, but they needed help for a few hours due to a shortage of staff. But I was hesitant, but they said it would be over by noon, so I reluctantly agreed. I explained the situation to Mark and told him I was going to work. Mark understood and said, "While you're gone, I'll try to talk to Hannah." I was worried. The work was supposed to be a correction of a ordering mistake and end by noon, but it went until 3 p.m. I wondered if Mark and Hannah were waiting for me, tired. I rushed home, saying I'm back, but no one replied. Feeling suspicious, I entered the living room. Then, I was faced with a shocking scene. Hannah and Mark were lying face down.
Hannah! Mark! What happened?
I rushed over, but both were lifeless. Nearby, there was a rope and a paper that looked like a suicide note. The note read, "I'm sorry. I was the one who violated Hannah. I don't expect to be forgiven. I'm taking responsibility and leaving this world with Hannah." My mind went blank reading it. What does this mean? Mark was the one who got Hannah pregnant. And to take matters into his own hands. I shakily dialed 911 for an ambulance and the police. Indeed, both were dead. Standing was all I could manage, overwhelmed by the events. This is a nightmare. It doesn't feel like it's happening in reality. Amid my confusion, the police proceeded with their work emotionlessly. A scene investigation was conducted immediately, and I was taken to the police station for questioning. There, I had to talk about things I could hardly bear to say. That Hannah wasn't my biological daughter, that she was pregnant, and that we were planning to go to the hospital and the police. After being detained for a long time and talking non-stop, I was naturally exhausted. I was still in shock and my mind was foggy. It was then. The detective facing me, an older man, looked at me with sympathetic eyes. "Your husband must have been panicked. Going to the hospital would mean tests, and then it would come out that he had a relationship with your daughter." At those words, I fired back, heatedly.
My husband is not like that. It's some kind of mistake.
Ma'am, I don't want to say this, but these kinds of incidents are surprisingly common. She's not your biological child, right? It's possible that the adoption was with that intent from the start. I was shocked by the detective's insinuation.
That's awful. How can you say such a thing? Both my husband and I have cared for Hannah dearly. It's unthinkable that he would adopt her with such vile intentions.
As I said this, the detective's expression grew even more pitying. Well, you'd want to believe that, but men can have sides to them they don't show their wives. Mark wasn't that kind of person. I wanted to say so, but my mouth just opened and closed. Fatigue and anger had reached their limits, and I could no longer speak. It seemed that from the content of that suicide note, they had concluded it was a murder-suicide. Despite it being unthinkable. No matter how much I protested, the police wouldn't listen. Because of this, no further investigation was conducted. Eventually, Hannah and Mark's funeral took place. Even as I went through the motions, I still couldn't believe it. It felt like this was all just a bad dream. My mind was constantly foggy, as if covered in a haze, but with my parents' help, we managed to get through the funeral. Hannah's school friends, especially Mia and Jake, who were close to her, had come. Mark's friends and colleagues were there too. Everyone was overwhelmed with grief. But, given the nature of their deaths, it was undeniable that they were treated like a sensitive subject. Despite not wanting to hear it, I caught snippets of murmurs from the mourners. That husband, seems he could only love little kids. And then with a child not related by blood. What a terrible incident. I wanted to scream out that it was all wrong. Why did it come to this? There's no way Mark could have done such a thing. Something must be terribly wrong. But I was powerless to do anything. I've been unable to sleep or eat for days on end. I've become completely emaciated. My life had been so ordinary up until now, why did it come to this? I couldn't muster the energy to do anything as time just passed by. Then, one day, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, it was Mia and her mother. It was the first time I'd seen Mia since the funeral. Her face was even more swollen from crying than before. Auntie,
Thank you for coming, Mia.
I forced a smile on my tired face and led them to the room. I wanted to play more with Hannah. Play games together, study together. I miss you, Hannah. Hearing Mia's pure voice, I too felt tears threatening to spill over. But then, something changed. Mia began to sob more and more violently. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's my fault.
What do you mean? How is it your fault, Mia?
Silently, Mia's mother spoke up. Actually, there's something Mia told me. And then, she shared a shocking truth.
So, that's what happened. Thank you for telling me, Mia.
After hearing the story, I was stunned. This fact should be reported to the police, Mia's mother said firmly. But I looked down. But it seems like they've already processed it as a murder-suicide. Then, Mia's mother said something unexpected. I have a relative in the police force. I'll talk to them and see if they can somehow get it reinvestigated. Auntie, please ask them on my behalf too. It's just too sad for Hannah and your uncle if it ends like this. Mia pleaded with tears in her eyes. Their words moved my weary heart just a bit. Okay. I want to uncover what happened to Hannah and Mark. Since Mia and her family are willing to help, I must gather my strength and do everything I can. A few days later, I was at the police station to talk about the facts Mia's family had shared. I succinctly relayed the information to the older detective I had spoken with before.
That's why I don't think it was a murder-suicide. Please, reinvestigate, I pleaded.
However, the detective frowned. We can't just reopen the case like that. The investigation concluded as per your husband's suicide note, he said, sounding irritated. I pleaded with the detective, who looked annoyed.
Please, I'm begging you.
I persisted, but his response didn't change. He even started saying things like we're busy with other cases. Left with no choice, I mentioned the name of the police relative Mia's mother had told me about. I've spoken to them, I said, and the detective suddenly turned pale.
Excuse me a moment.
He left and then returned a while later with someone who appeared to be his supervisor. Suddenly, his tone changed to polite, and he said, we will reinvestigate. I was surprised. Mia's mother's police relative must be quite influential. Regardless, I was grateful. I breathed a sigh of relief. Then, the situation took a significant turn. Later on, 2 police officers came to my house. Their demeanor was different from before, almost apologetic. As I led them to the living room, they suddenly apologized. We are sorry. We had been pursuing the investigation under the assumption of a murder-suicide, but it wasn't that.
Just as I thought,
I murmured. One of the officers, with a solemn face, informed me. The 2 were taken from us by a third party. The police, having conducted a reinvestigation, checked everything. They took fingerprints in the house again, reviewed belongings and security camera footage, and conducted interviews in the vicinity. As a result, they saw a car belonging to the true perpetrator on a security camera near our home. It was Jake's parents, Riley and Silas Ellington. They were the ones who had taken the lives of Hannah and Mark. In fact, Jake was the one who had impregnated Hannah. The confession I heard from Mia that day went back several months. Curious and knowledgeable, Jake, influenced by adult movies and comics, had awakened sexually. Out of curiosity, he had suggested to Mia, let's play an adult game. Mia, lacking knowledge, didn't quite understand what the act entailed. But she intuitively felt something ominous. And declined. Feeling it was wrong to spread such stories, she kept it to herself. Since then, Jake had stopped trying to involve Mia. And then, he had turned his attention to Hannah. According to Mia, Hannah didn't seem to have much knowledge about sex either. From my perspective, Hannah was innocent and didn't seem interested in such matters. Hannah was so kind, she couldn't refuse Jake. She probably didn't understand what it would entail. If only I had told her to refuse Jake's requests. Then none of this would have happened. It's my fault, Mia said, crying. She seemed to regret not having warned her. While this was happening, the situation took the worst possible turn. The two had passed away. Mia, attending the funeral, was shocked to learn that Mark was suspected and felt it couldn't be left as is. She bravely opened up to her mother. And then, Mia's mother brought her to me, knowing everything. It was Jake who impregnated Hannah, not your husband. There was no reason for him to commit suicide. Maybe. It's difficult to say this, but perhaps, to silence them, someone related to Jake took their lives. Mia's mother seemed reluctant to speak. But her horrific suspicion turned out to be accurate. Jake's parents, Riley and Silas, had devised a plan. This began when they learned of Hannah's pregnancy. Confused by her changing body, Hannah must have confided in Jake. Naturally, Jake's parents were informed. Riley and Silas panicked. Jake's family was prestigious, filled with socially high-standing elites. A sexual scandal involving their child, still a grade schooler, was absolutely forbidden. So, the two decided to take Hannah's life before the situation could escalate. They probably had concocted a story that she had been harassed by a pervert and died as a result. Initially, it seems they intended to lure Hannah alone somewhere. Likely, Hannah, having been called out for some reason, was supposed to leave by herself. That happened on a Saturday morning, after I had gone to work. But Mark must have confronted Hannah, who then told him the truth. Together, they visited Jake's home. However, this was unexpected for Riley and Silas. It seems they had told her to come alone, without her parents knowing, so having Mark come along threw their plan off. In a panic, Riley and Silas changed their plan. They decided to take the lives of both Hannah and Mark, making it look like a murder-suicide. Afterwards, they carried the bodies back to our living room. Next to Hannah and Mark, they placed a rope and a suicide note. The note claimed that Mark had looked at Hannah with sexual intentions, impregnating her, and had no choice but to take their lives. To avoid handwriting identification, the suicide note was forged on a computer. And with meticulous planning, the two wore gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints in the house. Their plan was executed flawlessly. I had wondered why the police investigation was so sloppy, but there was a reason for that. It was due to the unique customs of this land. In an area populated by the wealthy and business owners, the police often sided with them. It was mutually beneficial for getting various conveniences. Thus, as someone who was neither wealthy nor a business owner, an outsider like me was at a disadvantage from the start. Spending time and effort on investigations for outsiders would yield no return, so it naturally led to a shoddy job. Even in a situation that clearly seemed like third-party involvement, the police hastily concluded it was a suicide based on the note, without proper investigation. This incident was on the verge of being buried in darkness. However, an unexpected savior appeared. Mia and her mother. The police relative mentioned by Mia's mother was likely not just any officer, but someone with a significant position within the police force. Otherwise, they would not have agreed to a reinvestigation. I later found out that the elderly detective assigned to my case was demoted. Likely thanks to this influential police relative. Upon revisiting the investigation, they found Riley and Silas's car on a neighborhood security camera. Of course, that alone wasn't enough evidence. But testimonies from neighbors who saw a suspicious man and woman entering and leaving our house were also obtained. Based on these, a search warrant for Riley and Silas's home was issued. It's unclear if they anticipated this, but Jake's family had thoroughly cleaned their house. No fingerprints were found, but fortunately, fibers from the clothes Hannah wore that day were discovered at Jake's house. And footprints believed to be Mark's were also found at the entrance. These pieces of evidence led to the arrest of Jake's parents, Riley and Silas. Initially, the two tried to deceive, but when confronted with the evidence, they confessed. They admitted to killing Hannah and Mark to cover up the shocking scandal that Jake, a grade schooler, had impregnated Hannah. This cleared Mark of any suspicion. I was only slightly relieved. It was too cruel for Mark to have been made a victim and then be branded as a criminal on top of that. Afterward, this case became major news, causing a stir in the public eye. It was featured on TV and magazines as the darkness of a wealthy family, and apparently, photos of Jake's family were being spread on social media. I say apparently because I haven't actually seen it myself. Friends and acquaintances told me about it, but I've been avoiding filling my head with uncertain information from the internet. From now on, I must fight in the real world. That is, in court. As a bereaved family member, I decided to use the victim participation system and attend the courtroom. I absolutely had to say something to those people. Instead of spending my days feeling down, I wanted to fight back. On the day, as soon as I took my seat, Riley and Silas caught my eye immediately. Both were looking down, aged significantly. In that state, they didn't look like the glamorous wealthy at all. But more than that, I struggled to contain the anger and sorrow that kept welling up inside me. For the sake of these people's vanity, Hannah and Mark were made victims. I could never forgive them. Prompted by the judge, I gave my statement.
Hannah was not our biological child. But we raised her with love and care. Can you understand the grief of having her taken away suddenly for such an unjust reason? Moreover, you plotted to take my husband's life and smear him as a criminal. For the sake of appearances, to hide your child's wrongdoing, you took the lives of two people for such a trivial reason. I can never forgive you. I wish for the death penalty.
After I shouted that, the courtroom fell silent. Riley and Silas were pale and trembling. Perhaps now, they've realized the magnitude of the crime they committed. But it's too late. Repenting after taking lives is meaningless, everything is too late. If possible, I want them to return the 2 lives they took. If that's impossible, I wish for Riley and Silas's lives to be the compensation. And then, the verdict was announced. As requested, the 2 were given the death penalty. To be honest, I felt somewhat relieved. It's uncertain when the sentence will be carried out. Riley and Silas will spend their days in fear until that day comes. Hannah and Mark will not return, but I hope they understand even a fraction of the fear they caused. For such trivial reasons, the 2 who were taken are truly pitiful. And there's another person involved in this incident. Jake. Though he wasn't directly involved in the act that took Hannah and Mark's lives, he did impregnate Hannah. The bodies have been cremated, so confirmation is impossible, but Jake confessed, and his parents' testimonies exist. However, Jake is still a minor, a grade schooler. Children under 14 cannot be penalized. Therefore, a notification was sent to Child Welfare Services, and he was placed in a care facility. Now, he's confronting his sins, crying in regret. He's still a child, but he hurt Hannah due to his desires and curiosity. I hope he never forgets that. And I wish for his sincere repentance. Afterward, I reported the trial's outcome at the graves of Hannah and Mark. Mark, your name has been cleared. Hannah. I'm sorry, I couldn't protect you. But they received the death penalty. It doesn't bring you back, but I've avenged you. So, please rest in peace. As I said this, the flowers I had just placed trembled a little. It might have been the wind. But it felt as if they were responding to me, and tears welled up in my eyes. Then, 20 years passed. Now, I live far away from that land, in a big city. Staying in a place filled with memories of Hannah and Mark was painful, but more than that, I grew tired of being in a land dominated by the wealthy. People chasing after appearances and clout, swarming around privileges. That very mentality was the reason why Hannah and Mark were taken from us. It seemed so pointless to me, and I found no reason to stay in such a corrupt place. Since then, I've been working and engaging in activities through a victims' rights organization. I organize lectures, propose places where victims can talk to each other, and much more. Helping me is Mia. Mia has become a university student, studying psychology. When she went to university, she started living alone in the city where I was, and began helping me with the activities. Mia was tormented by guilt for not having warned Hannah. But the fault lies entirely with Jake's family, not Mia. You don't have to worry, I've told her many times. And though it took time, she gradually began to move forward, showing me her bright smile again. Recently, the existence of our victims' rights organization has gradually become known, leading to more lectures, magazine, and TV appearances. We've become quite busy, but I've never forgotten about Hannah and Mark. I've thought about them countless times, if they were still alive. But each time, I devoted myself more to my activities. To support the many families of crime victims, to be of some use to them. That, I believe, is the best way to honor Hannah and Mark. As one left behind, I am determined to fulfill this mission. No matter what difficulties lie ahead, I intend to keep moving forward. Believing that Hannah and Mark are watching over us from heaven. I've always thought about it, you know. Being a housewife is like being unemployed. You just do the housework and you don't have to worry about living expenses. It's really an easy job. If I were a woman, I'd definitely choose to be a housewife. A tipsy Harry said this with a carefree, innocent laugh. Today, we were visiting my in-laws' house and having a family dinner with relatives gathered around. Only the relatives near Harry and I heard these words, and it was clear turned them off. However, I simply stated the facts to my husband calmly. Harry, you do know I've already gotten a job offer, right? So, I'm not a housewife. No way, a woman like you getting a job? Don't underestimate the real world. But hey, it was funny, so I'll let it slide. Harry's chuckle turned into a roar of laughter, but I remained calm. He didn't know, but I did. It was he who underestimated the real world. Hey, Harry, what's up? You seem to be having a great time. Something funny happen? Or is it because Mary has been doing so well with the housework, you just got a bit carried away? Harry's laughter was so loud that it must have reached my in-laws sitting at a distance. They seemed interested in our conversation and came closer, making Harry whisper in a panic. Yeah, that's right. Just like Mom said, Mary's been doing great with the housework. It seemed like Harry was trying to ride along with his mother's words, trying to brush it off with some casual remarks. But I wasn't going to let the conversation just drift away like that. So, I decided to interrupt and express my gratitude to my in-laws. Mom, Dad, thank you so much for today. No, managing the house and also choosing to work outside, that's really impressive. Balancing both must be tough. But Mary is trying to take on a challenge. That's why we wanted to support her as much as we could. Thank you so much. I'm glad to hear you say that. Huh? What do you mean Mary is working outside? In fact, today's dinner also serves as a celebration for my new job. My husband, Harry, had a puzzled look on his face, unaware of this development. Huh? Harry didn't know about Mary's job offer? We thought Harry would naturally know, so we didn't tell him about the job celebration. My in-laws said this, tilting their heads at my husband's reaction. No way, Mary's working? Why would she need to do that? With my salary, we're not struggling to live. I'm getting recognized by my boss, especially the CEO, and promotion is a sure thing. My salary is going to increase even more, you know? Harry said this with a boastful air, turning into somewhat of a braggart. Despite my in-laws saying it was a celebration for my employment, he wouldn't believe it. True, Harry is a so-called elite employee at a major corporation, thriving in his role. While it might be true that he's valued by the CEO, knowing his true character would surely change that evaluation. Harry, you're getting too carried away. It's good to have confidence in your job, but try to be a bit more humble. But indeed, maybe Mary doesn't need to work. Why did you suddenly decide to get a job? My in-laws said this, admonishing my overly confident husband yet also wondering why I decided to work. Faced with their inquiry, I decided to reveal a fact unknown to my in-laws. It's because we don't have any savings. If I don't work, our living situation will become difficult. What? No savings? Why? No way, Mary, what are you talking about? Harry said he's working at a big company with a high income. There shouldn't be an issue of having no savings, right? My in-laws said this, tilting their heads in disbelief. I guess it's hard to believe, huh? Normally, what my in-laws are saying would be right. With my husband's income exceeding $200,000, it's unthinkable not to have savings. But that's if you're thinking normally. While listening to the exchange between me and my in-laws, my husband, Harry, had a smug smile on his face. Then, he started speaking with a mocking attitude. Oh girl, what are you even talking about here? Aren't Mom and Dad just disappointed? Mary, are you drunk or what? I'm not drunk, you know? Really? If you're saying that sober, then that's even more concerning. Harry said, bursting into laughter. Even for my in-laws, the situation was too outlandish to believe just by words. So, maybe it's understandable they'd think this way at this point. But he won't be laughing for long. I can prove we don't have any savings. Look at this. Saying that, I showed something to my husband and in-laws. Is this a bank balance? Did you prepare this just for now? But indeed, looking at this will tell us whether what Mary is saying is true or not. Just as my in-laws mentioned, what I showed them was the bank balance for our joint account. Both of them looked closely at the balance, but immediately after, their expressions turned to shock, their mouths gaping open in astonishment. What's this about? Only $600 in savings? Harry, what's the meaning of this? Explain yourself. I can't believe what Mary was saying is actually true. Both turned to Harry with stern faces, pressing him for answers. Finally, a hint of panic appeared on Harry, who had been all too complacent until now. Hey, Mary, why do you even show the bank balance on you? No, wait, Mom, Dad, this isn't what it looks like. Harry was surprised that I show the bank balance, but more than that, he seemed desperate to explain away the lack of savings to his parents. It's because of work-related expenses. I needed the money for that. Even so? Yes, that's right, isn't it? Harry tried to smooth talk his way into their understanding, but my in-laws were clearly not convinced, exchanging doubtful glances. Come on. Let's drop this topic. I need money for work-related things, so it'd really help if Mary could work too. That settles it, right? He suddenly pretended to accept my job as if it made all the sense in the world, trying to forcefully change the subject, but it was a no-go. Because I already knew everything. We can't end this conversation with such a lie. Hey, what are you planning to say now? I was about to expose Harry's secret. Sensing the dangerous air, Harry appeared extremely flustered upon hearing my words. Our lack of savings is because you've been spending money on another woman, isn't it? I know you've been cheating. What did you say? Harry was taken aback by the sudden revelation, panicking but not immediately believing my words. He slowly began to speak after a pause. Hey, what are you talking about? If you're gonna lie, at least come up with a better one. There's no way I'd cheat. This isn't funny at all. With that, Harry completely denied the affair, dismissing it as nonsense. The surprise of the affair allegation and their unwillingness to believe their son could do such a thing mixed together, leaving my in-laws visibly confused. Why are we suddenly talking about an affair? Isn't this rather disrespectful to Harry? Do you have any proof? I guess words alone aren't enough to convince them. It's natural for my in-laws to want to disbelieve. As my mother-in-law said, it seems necessary to present some evidence. So, I took out my phone to show them a particular image. I do have proof. Please, look at this image. Who is this woman? Mom, do you know her? No, I don't know her. Why is he entering such an expensive place with this person? The image showed an unfamiliar woman and Harry entering upscale brand stores and restaurants together. After a surprised reaction, Harry's expression quickly turned to anger, and he raised his voice. Hey,
Why do you have this picture? Are you into some creepy hobby of taking secret photos? That's messed up.
Harry cheating? That's ridiculous. But after seeing this picture, it's hard to deny, isn't it? Upon seeing the evidence of the affair, my in-laws were clearly troubled and shocked that it might be true. Sensing the situation was turning dire, Harry seemed to think it was better to convince his parents rather than blame me, and turn to them to start explaining. Well, yes. The woman in the picture is a colleague from work. She wanted to surprise her boyfriend with a gift, so I, representing the guys, accompanied her to give advice. Is that really true? If that's the case, it's a relief it was just a misunderstanding with Mary, right? Relief? Hardly. She might accuse me of the same thing again in the future. I think I need to make things clear to Mary to prevent that. Harry was trying to win over his parents with plausible reasons. Naturally, his parents would want to believe their own son's words. So, it wouldn't be surprising if they were persuaded by him. However, as much as I hate to say it, I knew the story Harry just told was a lie. Harry, there's no use saying that. I know that woman isn't your colleague but an employee from a client company.
What are you arbitrarily deciding and talking about? Really, stop it.
As expected, Harry wouldn't admit it. He claimed I was just making assumptions, which seemed to sway my in-laws. But what I'm about to say should convince them. Ready to reveal more, I slowly began to speak. I'm sorry to make you sad, Mom and Dad. But I'm not just making assumptions or jumping to conclusions. Because I've found out who Harry's affair partner is. Her name is Natalie, right? What? How do you know about Natalie? When I mentioned the affair partner's name, Harry was visibly shocked. My in-laws reacted similarly. There was a reason I knew the name of the other woman. Because the company that offered me a job is where Natalie works. Huh? What are you saying? That means you're working with a client of my company? That's a huge lie, no way I'd believe that. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. I'm just stating the facts. Harry tried to cover up by saying the affair partner was a colleague at his company, but in reality, she was going to be my colleague. That's how I knew he was lying. Hey Harry, what's this about? Were you lying to us after all?
Lying means you were trying to hide the affair, right? What's it gonna be, Harry? Answer me.
No, wait a second. There's also a chance that Mary is lying, isn't there? Right after, I showed Harry a piece of paper. It was the job offer letter. Even my husband, who had belittled the idea that I could get a job, finally seemed to believe and fell silent. My in-laws looked at Harry with stern faces, and panic was evident on his face. By the way, I haven't revealed my identity to Natalie yet. So, she shouldn't realize I'm Harry's wife. Are you serious? You really got a job at the same company as Natalie? What's your aim in all this? I intended to put silent pressure on Natalie. Plus, I wanted to see the situation for myself. There was a chance that Natalie was also being deceived by you. What do you mean I deceived Natalie? I mean, you might have pretended to be single while dating Natalie. After all, Harry, you never treated me as your wife. Harry must have assumed I was incapable of taking any action. But that was a huge mistake. I was already prepared. Prepared to expose all of Harry's true nature to my in-laws right here and now. Harry, sensing my determination, grew increasingly pale. Not treated as a wife? Mary, what does that mean? It means I've been mistreated by Harry all along.
Hey, stop saying things that could cause misunderstandings.
It's not a misunderstanding. You've called me an unemployed leech, living off my support, and mocked me for being a housewife as if I'm just freeloading. As I clarified the reasons, my in-laws looked at Harry with disbelief. Glancing around, I noticed several relatives nearby silently nodding. Earlier, Harry had said this in front of me and those relatives. I've always thought about it, you know. Being a housewife is like being unemployed. You just do the housework and you don't have to worry about living expenses. It's really an easy job. If I were a woman, I'd definitely choose to be a housewife. Being able to say such malicious words with a laugh is just like my husband. The relatives understood that it wouldn't be surprising if such a husband was mistreating his wife. Harry works outside, but I wasn't. So, he always acted like he was superior. Whenever I had any complaints, he'd immediately threaten me with divorce.
That's because you wouldn't do as I say.
I had tried to take care of the house in my own way, but my husband refused to acknowledge it, imposing his views on me and continually telling me, "You're no good." He knew I couldn't talk back. I had failed at getting a job several times before, and I already had low self-esteem. Harry, you took advantage of that, didn't you? Being told I was no good by Harry made my self-esteem even lower. That's why I ended up just doing whatever you wanted. I wasn't trying to make you do whatever I say. It's just how things ended up, wasn't it? My husband was desperate to find an excuse, but the more he tried, the more suspicious my in-laws became of him. Maybe it was my weakness that made me compliant. But the problem was when you started mistreating me. What are you trying to say? The period when you started going out more, using our savings, and stopped contributing money to the household almost coincided with when you began mistreating me. That's why I started suspecting your affair. When I said this, my husband's face turned pale, and he had no comeback. It seemed he was too preoccupied with his affair to consider anything else, but his actions were enough to raise suspicions of infidelity. Everyone, please listen. Earlier, Harry laughed and told me not to underestimate society. But who's really underestimating society here? No. Shameful as it is to say, it seems to be Harry. Yes, that's right. My question was met with nods from my in-laws, and voices of agreement rose from the other relatives. What, everyone, why? It's not decided yet that I'm in the wrong, is it? Mary could be making all this up. It's no use saying that. Just wait a moment. I'll get something that can definitively prove your affair. After telling my husband this, I briefly left the room to retrieve something. Then, I confronted my husband with it in front of my in-laws and the relatives. This is evidence of your affair that I got by hiring a detective. Can you still find an excuse for this? When did you hire someone to investigate? I can't believe you went that far. Among the evidence was not just the photos I showed earlier on my phone, but the clincher was a photo of the two entering a hotel. Moreover, there were audio recordings as well. I had a great time today. I'm looking forward to our next date. It would be nice if we could spend the entire night together next time. Oh, Harry, you're such a tease. Such statements wouldn't come from someone not having an affair. This was more than enough evidence to confirm the affair. Harry, you really are something. Truly despicable. His own parents had to say such things, showing just how vile my husband's true nature was. The other relatives also cast cold looks towards my husband. With such photos lined up, it was a natural reaction. Hey, Harry, I can't bear being mistreated and cheated on any longer. I'm going back to my parents' house. I'll send the divorce papers later, so be prepared. Saying that, I turned my back on my husband and was about to leave. That's when it happened.
Damn it, wait. Getting all high and mighty, I won't forgive you.
Suddenly, my husband lost his temper, raised his voice, and lunged at me.
No, stop.
I felt endangered and thought I had to escape, but my in-laws and the relatives were quicker to react.
Mary, watch out! Harry, enough is enough.
Mary, are you okay? Thankfully, my in-laws and the relatives managed to restrain my husband. I'm fine, thank you all. It was a close call, but I was really grateful everyone was there for me. After confirming I was safe, my in-laws once again turned to my husband and began to speak. Harry, your thinking is wrong. Mary is by no means an unemployed. You've been able to work without any trouble because Mary has been supporting you, right? I think it's amazing that you can work hard and earn money outside. But it's because Mary properly takes care of the house that you can concentrate on your work with peace of mind. And just because you earned the money, it doesn't mean you can spend it any way you like." Saying this, they tried to gently admonish Harry without provoking him. However, Harry was unreachable by his parents' words. "Ugh, I don't want to hear a lecture. She's a housewife, so of course, she should take care of the house. Why does it sound like Mary's doing something amazing?"
You still don't get it, do you? Mary is not your property. Dad's right. You should apologize to Mary right now for thinking it's only natural for her to do all the housework.
My in-laws clearly rejected Harry's way of thinking and told him to apologize to me. Yet, Harry remained unrepentant and scoffed at their words. "Shut up, you mediocrities. I'm more capable than anyone. If you have a complaint, earn more than me before you speak. You lot have no right to lecture me."
What did you say?
To everyone's astonishment, Harry began to look down on his parents and the relatives. It's true that among those present, Harry was earning the most. But is flaunting that and demeaning others really what a truly capable person does? I'm securing new contracts left and right, highly recognized by my boss, especially by the CEO. At this rate, I'm on the fast track to promotion. In Harry's mind, a person who can work equals a superior person. But a truly superior person wouldn't demean others like this. Disappointed by Harry's failure to see his mistake, I was overtaken by laughter at the absurdity of his ignorance. I ended up laughing. "What? Why are you suddenly laughing? What's so funny?" "I'm sorry. It seems you're quite confident in your current job, but I know things aren't going as well as you think." "Huh? What do you mean?" "The father of Natalie, with whom you're having an affair, is the CEO of your company." "What? You're kidding, right?" But Natalie never mentioned anything like that. That's because Natalie wants to succeed on her own without relying on her father's influence. Maybe it was too early for her to tell you, don't you think? If that's true, we're in big trouble. If the CEO finds out about this. Harry mumbled, starting to panic. Seeing his reaction, I was convinced he knew nothing. I had already made contact with Natalie during the investigation of the affair. That's when I heard the story from her. Unfortunately, it's impossible to keep this from the CEO. I'll be reporting your affair with Natalie. I told him this and was about to leave for my parents' house once and for all. "Mary, please. Don't tell the CEO. I was wrong. I had no idea Natalie was the CEO's daughter. I must have been deceived by Natalie. I'm a victim too, right? Even if you didn't know, the fact that you mistreated me and had an affair doesn't change. No matter what you say, I won't forgive you. Come on, Dad, Mom, everyone, convince Mary. If you all talk to her, I'm sure she'll understand." As I firmly rejected him, my husband pleaded for help from his parents and the relatives. But there was no one willing to help him.
"I don't know anything about it. It's your own fault. I'm cutting ties with you. I will never help you."
I feel the same as Dad. When my in-laws declared their disownment, the other relatives also surrounded my husband, glaring at him as if to say they felt the same. Overwhelmed by their intensity, my husband finally fell silent. Afterward, I filed for divorce, then returned to my parents' home to live peacefully. Amidst all this, my in-laws came over to apologize once again. "Mary, we're really sorry about what happened last time. Our foolish son has caused you so much trouble.
No matter how many times we apologize to you, Mary, it won't be enough.
Please, both of you, lift your heads. The one at fault is Harry, not you two. It helps us to hear you say that. Actually, we came today because we have something important to tell you." "Something important?" "Yes, it's about." My father-in-law proceeded to tell me about my ex-husband's current situation. Because I had reported the affair to his company, he lost the trust of the CEO, the story spread throughout the company, and everyone began to look at him with disdain. It seems my ex-husband's performance at work was indeed genuine, which is probably why the betrayal hit the CEO and employees so hard. If he had just stayed focused and behaved, he could have surely made it to the top, as he always said. Instead of climbing the ladder, he's pushed himself into a position where he had to resign voluntarily. It's truly a pathetic story. So that's what happened. It's self-inflicted, but it's such a waste for Harry. If he wanted, my ex-husband could find a job and start over. However, unless he regrets, reflects, and changes his mindset, he's likely to repeat the same mistakes. Meanwhile, I had a chance to speak with Natalie again, and she said, "I heard from my father. Harry was your husband, wasn't he? I'm truly sorry for having a relationship with him without knowing. If Harry was pretending to be single, it's not your fault for not realizing. Please, don't apologize." After she apologized, I decided to forgive Natalie. She also told me she had lost trust in my ex-husband and had broken up with him. Disowned by his parents and relatives and abandoned by Natalie, my ex-husband had become completely isolated. This led to a mental breakdown, leaving him unemployed. This was a perfect example of poetic justice. After some time enjoying my solitude, I eventually remarried. My new husband actively helps with housework and we live a life of mutual respect. Working together, we're sure to lead a happy life. I felt a strong sense of assurance in this belief. It was just a moment of folly. It's all in fun. Since Tiana seems to be reflecting on her actions, how about we let bygones be bygones this time? Despite being newlywed and pregnant, I found out about my husband's affair. Yet, he puts his actions on a shelf and starts throwing a tantrum, not wanting a divorce. His mother comes to his aid, pressing me to forgive him. But I have no intention of forgiving a husband who betrayed his pregnant wife. On the contrary, I had prepared a punishment that would leave him unable to start over.
Why should I have to hold back for you guys? I'm going to expose you thoroughly and drop you into hell. Oh, did you forget, by any chance? How smart I am. I showed them my smartphone with a C attitude. It displayed the live screen on social media. Right after, both the mistress and my husband's phones received a call simultaneously. From the company. Me too. Why? Picking up the call, their faces turned an interesting shade of pale. My name is Tiana. I married my coworker, Ken, a year ago and we're expecting our long-awaited baby, currently in my 7th month of pregnancy. We, newlyweds, are looking forward to the birth of our baby. We work at a well-known major corporation where I am a programmer. In a society where understanding for maternity or paternity leave is often lacking, fortunately, my coworkers and superiors have been nothing but supportive and happy for my pregnancy. You'll be going on leave soon, huh? Gonna miss you. I'm about to hit my 8th month of pregnancy and had informed my company that I plan to work up until the last moment, but it's about time to go on maternity leave. My boss gave me a kind word, encouraging me to give birth to a healthy baby, to which I nodded with a smile. It seems like everyone in the other departments can't stop talking about Tiana's baby too. Ken seems to be really looking forward to the kid. What? What's that? Ken is all ready. Ken works in a different department from me. He's been saying stuff like my wife graduated top of her class from Harvard and has an IQ of 140, so our kid's bound to be smart. Maybe they'll be a doctor or a government official someday. Man, the baby's not even born yet and he's already saying stuff like that. I couldn't help but give a wry smile at Ken's overenthusiasm. But I guess it's all because he's looking forward to our child's arrival. I even found his excitement kind of endearing. Long day, huh? Need any help with anything? Oh, I'll take care of the laundry. When I got home from work and was preparing dinner, Ken offered to help with the household chores. Thanks, could you? It's getting harder to do chores since my belly's gotten bigger. It'd really help me out if you could take care of it.
Ken happily took on the task of doing the laundry. My colleagues, my boss, and even my husband have all been supportive and considerate of my condition. I felt truly blessed and grateful for the warmth of the people around me. But there was one thing that worried me. It was about my mother-in-law, Ken's mom. From the beginning of our marriage, she had disliked me, calling me a high and mighty woman because of my education. I'd been intentionally avoiding interaction with her because she'd always make snide remarks whenever we met, but since becoming pregnant, I've had to see her more often. I can't exactly avoid showing her the baby after it's born. The thought made me feel gloomy. However, Ken has been reassuring me, saying, no matter what my mom says, I'll protect Tiana. I decided to trust in his words and not to stress about my mother-in-law for now. Unlike with my mother-in-law, I get along well with Ken's sister, and Ken has even said, if you ever have trouble, you should talk to my sister. Though my mother-in-law's attitude worries me, I feel blessed to be surrounded by supportive relationships. Knowing I have many reliable people to turn to if anything troublesome happens felt reassuring. I just hope everything goes smoothly with the birth. However, an incident that trampled on my wishes was about to occur. One day, while my husband Ken was out, I got a call from my mother-in-law. On the surface, she was concerned about my health, but her words were laced with the usual sarcasm.
You shouldn't slack off on the housework just because you're pregnant. If you don't move around, you'll just get fatter and make the delivery more difficult. It's not like you can just relax at home now that you're not working, right?
Huh? Yes, I'll be careful. I couldn't help but give a wry smile at her blunt way of speaking. Talking to my mother-in-law always left me feeling drained because of her knack for unwittingly hurting people with her words. Ken had told me I didn't need to force myself to meet with his mom, but since she's his mother, I tried to act normally. Thinking back, my relationship with my mother-in-law had been rocky from the start. I remember her asking Ken why he chose to marry someone 5 years older, referring to me. Moreover, my top-ranking graduation from Harvard only added fuel to her fire for mother-in-law bullying. She got married right after high school, and seems to believe that a woman's education is nothing but a hindrance, that it's natural for a woman to stay home and wait for her husband's return. She didn't like the idea of me working in the first place and strongly opposed when I said I intended to work until the last minute after my pregnancy was discovered.
You're planning to work even though you have a baby in your belly? What are you thinking?
There are handovers to do at work, and I can't just quit suddenly. I've checked with my doctor and plan to work as long as it's safe. What a terrible mother. I can't believe it. My mother-in-law hardly listened to my earnest explanations and started to berate me more frequently. It seemed she couldn't stand me, as her snide remarks gradually escalated.
Having a too high IQ as a mother might cause developmental disorders in the child. Oh, it might be your fault if the child ends up disabled.
She took some dubious information she found somewhere at face value and used it to stoke my fears. I've never heard of such a thing.
Are you even a mother? You should do your research properly.
Sorry. Even though my mother-in-law's words seemed like mere nitpicking, I endured without talking back, not wanting to worsen our relationship. Then, taking my silence as consent, her attitude became increasingly terrible. Exhausted by my mother-in-law's behavior, I spoke to Ken when he came home. Your mom deliberately says things to stir up my anxiety. Can't you do something about it? Mom's just worried about you and the baby. I don't think she means any harm, so just ignore her. Don't take it too seriously. Despite my plea, Ken didn't take it seriously and just laughed it off. I try not to mind, but there's a limit. Please, talk to your mom for me. Come on, don't be so tense. Maybe you're just taking everything the wrong way because of maternity blues. That's not it. Just try to take it easy, it's not good for the baby either. Ken brushed off my concerns and headed to the bathroom for a bath. I wanted him to listen seriously, but it seemed he didn't think it was a big deal. Really in trouble here. It wouldn't hurt to listen more seriously, I sighed involuntarily. He said he would protect me from his mom. I felt betrayed by Ken's attitude. Hey, Tiana? While I was stewing in my mixed feelings, my husband called out from the bathroom. What? When called, he asked me to bring him his smartphone that was left on the table. So oblivious, although I was slightly annoyed, I reconsidered, thinking it best to avoid arguments when expecting a baby soon. As instructed, I picked up Ken's smartphone from the living room table. Oops. At that moment, I accidentally let it slip from my hand, dropping Ken's smartphone onto the floor. I hope it's not broken. The impact from the drop caused the phone's cover to come off. I hurriedly picked up the smartphone and the cover, trying to put them back together. That's when I noticed something. What's this? What does it mean? When I flipped over the smartphone with the cover off, I found something unbelievable attached to it. A photo showing a man and a woman kissing. The people in the photo were Ken and a young woman. I recognized the woman's face. She was indeed a female coworker from Ken's department. The Purikura had a date on it. Just a week ago, quite recent. Finding this clear evidence of infidelity, I was deeply shaken. What should I do? I don't want to believe it. For the moment, I took out my own smartphone and took a photo as evidence. Maybe it was a mistake made in the heat of the moment at a department drinking party, under the influence of alcohol. I hoped that was the case. With this wish, I put the smartphone cover back as it was. Hey, you done yet? I could hear Ken hurrying me from the bathroom. Trying not to show it on my face, I concealed my inner turmoil and handed him his smartphone. I could pretend nothing happened. Our baby is going to be born in a few more months. But what if it really was an affair? Maybe now is the time to gather the courage to find out if Ken's cheating is true. While hoping no more facts about my husband's infidelity would come out, I decided to look for evidence. However, my hopes would be betrayed. I ended up discovering undeniable proof of my husband's affair. Company loans every employees a portable laptop, so seizing the opportunity while Ken was out, I secretly started up the computer. Carelessly, no password was set. He must have thought I'd never find out about the affair, thinking too highly of himself. This thought made me even angrier. I opened the email software. There, I found exchanges between Ken and his mistress, Mia. I can't wait to see Mia again. My wife's been so whiny lately, maybe it's maternity blues, but it's getting on my nerves. Poor Ken, next time we meet, I'll make sure to give you all the comfort you need. As I read through their emails, it seemed Ken often spoke poorly of me to his affair partner, Mia. The kid will definitely be smart because it's mine. I want to divorce as soon as the baby is born, take custody of the child, and then marry Mia right away. Shockingly, Ken was planning to divorce me after our child was born, take custody, and then remarry with his mistress, Mia. Going through their extensive email exchanges, I discovered that Ken had been bringing Mia into our home when I was out. Overwhelmed by this egregious betrayal, I started to cry uncontrollably. Perhaps due to the intense stress, my belly began to hurt. Feeling deep despair from the betrayal of a husband I had trusted, I thought. Why? I had trusted him all this time. Just when I felt like crumbling under the weight of this shocking truth, the baby inside me kicked strongly. As if encouraging me to be strong. Wiping away my tears, I realized I can't just sit here and cry. I'm going to be a mother, I can't break down over this. I refuse to let this go without a fight. To protect the future of my unborn child, I vowed to fight back against my husband and his mistress. To thoroughly crush them, I continued to gather evidence of the affair, even with my heavy belly. While keeping up appearances as usual, I secretly installed a GPS tracker in Ken's car. Modern GPS devices are highly efficient. Monitoring his movements, I quickly identified that they were frequently visiting a specific love hotel. I also managed to identify Mia's social media account and confirmed that she made suggestive posts on the same days Ken was out. Thinking about how they had been carrying on their affair behind my back while I was pregnant made me feel nauseous. I've gathered almost all the evidence I need, now it's time for, I devised a final plan to obtain undeniable proof of their affair. Hey, this Saturday is my mom's birthday, right? Since it'll be busy after the baby is born, I thought it might be a nice opportunity to go out for dinner with both of our parents. Is that okay? Of course, that's fine. It'll be good for you to spend some quality time with the family. I've got something on that day, so I can't join, but please send my regards to your parents. Ken readily agreed. I sensed a bit of excitement in his demeanor about me leaving. It made me silently chuckle, thinking he had fallen right into my plan. Ken had no clue. The birthday we were celebrating this Saturday wasn't my mother's, but my mother-in-law's. With Ken absent, the birthday dinner for my mother-in-law took place at a fancy restaurant she had always wanted to visit, just the four of us, my in-laws, my sister-in-law, and me. I had told the in-laws that Ken couldn't make it because of work. It would have been nicer if Ken could have joined us. My mother-in-law expressed her disappointment, but she seemed much happier than usual, delighted to be at her dream restaurant. For once, she didn't make any snide remarks toward me. As the birthday celebration was winding down, and it seemed like we were about to part ways, I mentioned that I had forgotten the gift for my mother-in-law at home and that Ken might be back by now. Oh, then let's all go to Tiana's place. It's a special occasion after all, and I'd like to see Ken too. My mother-in-law suggested cheerfully, unsuspecting of anything. The restaurant where we celebrated the birthday was very close to my house. We caught a taxi and all piled in. Arriving at home, we walked into the house together. There was no sign of Ken in the living room. Where could Ken be? If he's not in the living room, he's probably in the bedroom. Let's all go and surprise him. Everyone nodded at my suggestion. What my mother-in-law didn't notice was that at the entrance, there were Ken's shoes and a pair of women's shoes I didn't recognize. They must be in the bedroom. We headed to the bedroom and opened the door.
Yikes! What? Why is everyone here? What's going on?
Sure enough, there were Ken and his mistress, Mia, embracing each other, completely naked.
Ken! What is this? Who is this woman?
My mother-in-law screamed, shaking with anger at the sight of her son's indecent appearance.
Tiana, wasn't it supposed to be your mom's birthday dinner?
Too caught up in your affair to even remember your own mother's birthday? Today is your mom's birthday, I said coldly, looking down on them.
Forgetting your own mother's birthday because of an affair. You disgrace! Shameful! To think you would do something like this.
Both my sister-in-law and father-in-law started berating Ken with disgusted expressions. Facing his family's accusations, Ken hung his head, his face pale. His nakedness only added to the absurdity of the situation. Although I had been gathering evidence of Ken's infidelity, I knew that confronting him directly might still lead him to deny everything. So, I decided to create a situation he couldn't wiggle out of by involving his own family. I knew he would surely invite his mistress over if I was out of the house. Predicting this, I planned the birthday dinner for my mother-in-law. As expected, Ken had emailed Mia to come over while his wife was out, thinking he had the house to himself. Of course, I saved those exchanges as evidence too. You've really been doing whatever you please up till now, haven't you? It's not like that, this was just a moment of weakness. Planning to make excuses now? It's not an excuse. I felt lonely since Tiana got pregnant and stopped paying attention to me, and then she seduced me.
Hey! Don't put the blame on me. You were the one who said you were tired of your wife and came on to me.
Ken and Mia started a shameful argument, yelling at each other. You were planning to divorce me after our child was born and then marry her, right? I've seen all the emails. If you were going to have an affair, at least you could have set a password on your computer. Ken couldn't come up with a reply and just looked down in silence.
You guys are newlyweds. And with a baby on the way. What were you thinking? Betraying Tiana with an affair.
The whole family was furious with Ken. I have nothing to do with this. While being condemned by everyone present, and with Ken diminished to silence, his mistress, Mia, hurriedly dressed and tried to escape.
Where do you think you're going? If you run, I'll submit the video of you and Ken being overly affectionate at work as evidence.
I grabbed Mia's hand as she tried to flee and said so. Mia turned pale at my words and started crying, begging for forgiveness. But there was no way I would be swayed by such an act. Knowing how much they had ridiculed me, I demanded a divorce from Ken, along with child support payments and a no-contact order with our child. And of course, I told Mia she would have to pay damages too. Mia meekly agreed to the terms for the compensation. But Ken, not willing to accept my demands, started arguing that it was just a fling. It was just a moment of weakness. I never really intended to marry her, believe me. It was all just for fun. Hey, Tiana, Ken is saying he's sorry, so how about we just let bygones be bygones this time? Then, my mother-in-law, perhaps moved by his attitude, surprisingly pressed me to forgive Ken. Mom, you saw what Ken did with your own eyes, didn't you? Indeed, having an affair is wrong. But your baby will be born soon. Can't you forgive him just this once? I can't do that. Ken is the one who did something wrong. Why should I be the one to forgive? That's exactly why you're so uptight. I pity the child being raised by such a narrow-minded mother. You know what, I could raise the child. That might be for the best. My mother-in-law started arguing that she'd be a better parent than someone like me who couldn't forgive a single affair. What are you talking about? I'm the victim here.
That's why you should just forgive a simple mistake and not act like a victim. You're so clueless.
My mother-in-law was adamant that I was in the wrong for not being able to forgive Ken. As I felt my indignation rise, my father-in-law, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up.
Silence. What are you even saying? Tiana is the one who's been betrayed by her husband, and you're telling her to be ashamed of acting like a victim?
His rare outburst silenced my mother-in-law. Then, Ken and Mia's phones rang simultaneously. From the company. Me too. Why? They answered the phones with puzzled looks, but their faces quickly turned pale. Not surprisingly, there was a company laptop on the bedroom table, used by Ken for working from home, with the camera of an internal video conference accidentally left on, broadcasting everything online to the company. Over 100 people were logged into the online meeting room, including the company president. Everyone has already seen everything you two have done.
How could you? This is awful. That's right. Why did you have to involve the company?
Angered, they started to blame me. Why should I have to hold back for you too? You were the ones who made a fool of me first. I'll expose you thoroughly and let you fall into hell. Oh, did you forget by any chance? How smart I am. I showed them my smartphone. It displayed the live screen on social media. I had taken over Mia's SNS account in advance and was live streaming video from a camera I had hidden in the room. The account was made public, visible to anyone around the world. Mia's misconduct is probably known to all her friends and relatives by now. Having endured so much until now, I wasn't going to hold back when it came to punishment. That's what I thought as I planned to bring them down to hell today.
Please stop the broadcast. At least let us get dressed, they begged and prostrated themselves.
No, what you two did to me doesn't compare at all. With faces twisted in despair, Ken and Mia looked utterly defeated.
Tiana. I was completely in the wrong about everything until now. Please, forgive me.
My mother-in-law, who had always meekly listened to whatever I said, began to tremble and hastily apologized for all the past mistreatment.
Let me apologize as well. My wife and son have been inexcusable.
My father-in-law added, deeply sorry and apologize for his family's past actions. And you? What are you going to do? I said, glaring at Ken. I will comply with all of Tiana's demands. Ken, as if having given up on everything, agreed to accept all my conditions. When I urged him to sign the divorce papers immediately in front of everyone watching the live stream, he complied without any objection. Of course, the president and acquaintances were watching the video too, making everyone a witness. I felt incredibly refreshed that everything went according to plan. Months have passed since then. I have safely given birth, and a beautiful baby girl is sleeping peacefully in my arms. Standing in front of the computer, I showed my daughter to my colleagues and superiors over a remote connection. Everyone at work was delighted to see the baby's growth through the screen. Since then, I received alimony from my ex-husband and his mistress. My ex-husband moved back to his parents' house and was placed under the watchful eye of his father. Unable to endure being the subject of gossip at work, both he and his mistress ended up quitting their jobs. Ken is reportedly looking for re-employment to pay the alimony, but due to his pride from previously working at a major corporation, he's struggling to keep a job and has resorted to doing day labor. After the incident, my mother-in-law became a recluse at home after her mistreatment became known around the neighborhood. My former sister-in-law shared these updates about the former in-laws with me. The fact that I was betrayed by my husband was unbearably painful. However, thanks to the presence of my daughter, I did not give up and am now living a peaceful life. Life as a single mother will have its challenges. But I have people around me who support me. I want to continue to be strong without giving up, for my daughter and me. That's what I thought, looking at my daughter sleeping peacefully in my arms.